Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. This happened about 8 months ago, and it still messes with my sleep sometimes. So, I'm Dylan. I'm 26, live in Austin, work as a software engineer. Pretty regular life. I guess I'm kind of outdoorsy, like I've always liked camping and hiking, but I don't go out every weekend or anything. At the time this happened, I'd been seeing this girl, Tara, for a little over a month. We weren't super serious yet, but things were going well. Like, we were getting close, and I wanted to do something kind of special. She mentioned she hadn't been camping in years and missed being in nature. I thought it'd be a cool idea to plan a little weekend trip. Just told me about this place called Pine Creek Reserve. It's in East Texas, near Jasper. I'd never heard of it, but she said her family used to go there when she was younger. She remembered it being peaceful and quiet, with trails that weren't super well known. I looked it up, and it checked out. Not a lot of online chatter about it, mostly just local hiking blogs. I thought it sounded perfect, secluded but not sketchy. We left Friday around noon. The drive was a little over 4 hours, and once we got past Lufkin, it got real rural real fast. The roads got narrow, the houses fewer, and the trees thicker. I remember telling her the pine trees out there looked like they'd been there since the dinosaurs. Just tall and endless, almost closing in over the road in some places. We got to the park around 5:30 p.m. The main entrance had a small ranger station, but nobody was there. There was a map pinned to a board, so I took a picture of it just in case we lost service, which we did, about 15 minutes in. Tara suggested this spot she remembered from when she was a kid. Said it was a little off the main trail, by a slow creek with big smooth rocks you could sit on. Sounded nice, so we packed light and hiked in. It took about 45 minutes, with the last 10 or so off trail. She was right, it was beautiful, really quiet, no signs of other people. The creek moved slow, and the water was so clear you could see the little pebbles at the bottom. There was this patch of flat ground surrounded by pine trees where we set up the tent. That first night was actually great. We made a fire, roasted some hot dogs, drank some cheap wine from a can, classy, I know, and just laid back staring at the stars. It got real cold around midnight, but we had enough blankets and were pretty bundled up. We ended up falling asleep to the sound of the water and some distant owl calls. At that point, I remember thinking the trip was already worth it. I felt connected to her in a way I hadn't before, but that feeling didn't last long. The next day we slept in late. I got up around 10 and made some coffee with one of those little camping stoves. Tara was still asleep, curled up in the sleeping bag, and everything just felt peaceful. After breakfast, we decided to do a long hike. There was a faint path along the creek going deeper into the woods, so we followed that for a while. It was slow going since parts of it were washed out and we had to climb over a few fallen trees. We hiked for hours, probably 5 or 6 total, before we turned around to head back. When we got close to the clearing, I noticed something was off. We walked into the clearing and stopped dead. The tent was shredded. Not just like a tear. I'm talking long, violent slashes, like someone went at it with a box cutter. Our sleeping bags were ripped up too, and our food was everywhere. One of the bags of trail mix was dumped out, and the little metal cooler was open and tipped on its side. I stood there for a second trying to process it. I said something like, "Must have been a raccoon or something," but Tara just stared at it, pale as hell. She walked up to the tent, leaned in close, and touched one of the slashes. "No," she said, real quiet. "This wasn't an animal." She pointed out how the cuts weren't from claws. They were jagged but straight, like someone sawed through the fabric in one motion. She looked around and then whispered, "He found me." I didn't know what she meant at first. I asked her who, and she hesitated for a long time before she said, "Brent, my ex." Apparently, she dated this guy a year or two ago. They broke up after things got weird. She didn't go into a lot of detail, but she said he got obsessed with her near the end. Showed up at her job, followed her home once, sent her these long, angry voicemails. The usual red flag stuff, but worse. She said the last time she saw him was a week before our trip. He came into the coffee shop where she worked, saw us together through the window, and apparently lost it. She didn't tell me because she thought he was finally done. Clearly, he wasn't. I didn't want to freak out yet. I told her maybe it was just a coincidence, or some punk teenagers, or even a pissed-off ranger who didn't like us going off trail. I was trying to rationalize it, calm her down, but then we found the boot prints. There were two distinct ones. One going in circles around the site, like someone had walked around while we were gone. They were deep, too, like whoever it was stood in one place for a long time. That's when I really started feeling it in my chest, that cold grip of fear. We debated what to do. The sun was going down, and we were a long hike from the car. I thought maybe we could pack what we had left and just head out, but Tara didn't want to move until morning. I agreed, reluctantly. We set up a little fire and tried to stay close to it. I kept my flashlight in one hand, my camping knife in the other. Just before dark, Tara went to pee behind a tree. She came running back 5 minutes later, shaking. She found a still burning cigarette butt on the ground. She doesn't smoke. I don't either. That was when I knew, without a doubt, someone was out there. I swept the tree line with my light, shouting, "Hey, who the hell's out there?" But there was nothing, just silence. I thought about trying to chase them, but it was too dark and I had no clue where they went, so we stayed put. When we finally decided to hike out, we got to the car, and both rear tires were slashed, clean cuts, deep ones. We were stuck, no signal, no way to call anyone. The nearest ranger station was miles away. It was already pitch black, so we left the car and started walking. I don't know if you've ever hiked through thick woods at night with no moon, but it's like being underwater. Even with the flashlight, I could only see maybe 10, 15 feet ahead. Every branch creaked. Every twig that cracked felt like it was right behind us. We didn't talk much, just walked fast and tried to stay quiet. Tara kept checking over her shoulder, and I was holding the flashlight in one hand and the camping knife in the other, like some idiot who thought he was going to fight off a psycho with a $15 Walmart blade. About 30 minutes into the hike, we heard something behind us, like a branch breaking, loud and close. We stopped dead. I turned off the flashlight and we just stood there, holding our breath. The sound didn't come again, but I swear I could feel someone nearby. Watching. Waiting. I whispered to Tara to keep moving, slower this time. I didn't want to run and give whoever it was a trail to follow. At one point, a rock, maybe the size of a baseball, came sailing out of the trees and landed just a few feet to our right. It bounced off a root and rolled toward us. That moment right there, that was when I felt the real terror hit. Because it wasn't random. It wasn't like something fell from a branch. That rock was thrown deliberately. I swung the flashlight toward the trees and scanned the area, but again, nothing. Just blackness and a few distant pines. We kept walking, faster this time. Tara was crying but trying to keep it quiet. I think I was too. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline kept us moving. We didn't really have a plan, just keep heading in the direction we came from, praying we'd eventually hit the trailhead or run into someone. It felt like we walked for hours. My phone was dead. Hers had maybe 5% battery, but still no signal. At one point, we hit a fork in the trail and had no idea which way to go. I picked right. Thank God I did. Around dawn, the trees started to thin, and we saw the outline of a wooden sign up ahead. It was the ranger station. The building was small, and nobody was inside yet. but the door was unlocked. We got inside and just collapsed. I locked the door behind us and sat there shaking, knife still in hand. Tara curled up in the corner and didn't say a word. Maybe 30 minutes later, a ranger showed up. I must have looked insane when he walked in, sitting on the floor with a knife and bags under my eyes like I hadn't slept in a year. I tried to explain what happened, but it came out messy. He calmed us down and called in backup. They took us seriously, which surprised me. I thought we were going to get some lecture about backcountry rules or trespassing, but once we showed them the photos of the slashed tent and tires, and Tara gave them Brent's full name and description, they mobilized fast. Turns out the park had a few motion-triggered cameras posted near some of the less popular trails, mostly for wildlife tracking. Rangers checked one near the trailhead we used, and sure enough, there he was. Brent, on camera, just standing there. Just standing, staring straight into the lens with this dead, glassy look on his face. I didn't see the footage myself, but the ranger who watched it said Brent showed up around 3 a.m. and just loitered near the sign for over an hour. He ducked out of view at one point, then came back. He had a backpack and a tire iron sticking out the top of it. They searched the area that morning and found him not far from the trailhead camera, hiding behind one of the information boards. He had a knife in his coat pocket. They arrested him on the spot. Charges were pretty serious. Stalking, criminal mischief, tampering with a vehicle, attempted assault. I don't know the full legal breakdown, but he had priors, and that didn't help him. We had to give statements and eventually left the station sometime that afternoon. We didn't even go back for the tent. Left everything behind. Tara moved in with her sister not long after that. She didn't feel safe in her apartment anymore, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. We kept seeing each other for a while, but the whole thing kind of changed us. Or maybe it showed us who we really were when pushed. We're still friends, kind of. We check in now and then. As for me, I haven't been camping since. I still have the knife. Still have the flashlight, too. I keep them in my nightstand drawer. Every now and then I'll go to a park or a trail near the city just for a walk, and I always feel fine, until the trees get too thick or the trail gets too quiet. That's when I start to remember how still it was out there, how it felt like something was hiding in the brush just behind the pines. Not supernatural, not some ghost story, just a man. A man with a knife, a man who wanted us gone, and he almost got what he wanted. My name's Logan. I was 22 when this happened, just a regular biology major doing my undergrad at a university in Central Texas. This was back in the fall of 2021. For one of my upper-level classes, I had this semester-long project where we had to document bird activity in a particular biome. Nothing super intense, just observations, sound recordings, photos, stuff like that. Most people picked easy spots, parks, nature reserves, even just their backyard feeders. But I guess I wanted to be different. Or maybe I just liked the idea of getting away for a while. So I picked a location out in the Piney Woods, which is this forested region in East Texas. Not a super well-known area, just this stretch of government-owned land near an old creek that isn't even named on Google Maps unless you really zoom in. I'd been there once before with a buddy for a short hike, and I remembered how remote it felt, like no cell reception, no real trails, just trees, water, and silence. I drove out on a Friday morning in October. The weather was perfect, high 60s during the day, dropped to the 40s at night. I brought my tent, food for 2 nights, my audio recorder, bird books, camera, and other gear, including a decent-sized hunting knife, mostly for safety, and my favorite binoculars. I also had this old field backpack I'd used since high school for hiking trips. I got to the edge of the woods around 2 p.m., parked off a dirt road, and started hiking in. I didn't see a single person on my way in. not even another parked car. I hiked maybe 2.5 miles in before finding a good spot near the creek. Flat, shaded, and with a clear view of the water for bird watching. I set up camp, got a little fire going, and by 5 p.m., I was sitting by the water with my camera trying to get shots of a wood duck I kept hearing but couldn't quite see. That first night was chill. Just the sound of the water trickling over rocks, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the crackle of my fire. I had a little notebook I was writing in, listing the birds I'd seen or heard so far. I turned in around 10 p.m., a little buzzed from being out in the middle of nowhere by myself. Slept straight through the night. The next morning was when things started to feel different. I woke up just after sunrise. The light was coming through the tent walls, golden and soft. At first, everything felt normal, but once I got out to start making coffee, I realized my binoculars weren't where I left them. I always kept them hanging on this low branch right outside the tent flap, just so they wouldn't get crushed in the bag. Gone. I thought maybe I'd brought them inside the tent or set them down near the creek the day before. I looked everywhere, pulled everything out of my tent, checked my bag, walked around camp, even retraced my steps from the day before along the creek path. Nothing. Then I realized my knife was gone too. It had been tucked into this side loop of my backpack, always in the same spot. The kind of thing you do so often you don't even think about it, and now it just wasn't there. My first thought was that I messed up. Maybe I left it at the car somehow or dropped it on the trail, but my gut didn't believe that. I'm usually really careful with my stuff, especially on solo trips. I mean, you have to be. I remember standing there in the woods, still kind of half awake, just feeling this slow pressure building in my chest. Like something was off. Not dramatic, just this subtle wrongness. The air felt heavier, like when a storm's coming, but the sky was perfectly clear. I told myself I'd find the gear later and got on with my day. I spent most of Saturday walking short loops around the area, taking audio recordings and notes. I got some cool photos of a pileated woodpecker and a small flock of cedar waxwings that landed in a sweet gum tree across the creek. But the whole time, I had this creeping sensation, like I was being watched. Not constantly, just off and on. A few times I thought I heard movement behind me, twigs snapping, that kind of thing, but every time I turned around, there was nothing there. Once I even called out. Just, hey, someone there? More out of instinct than anything else. No answer. That night, I debated leaving. It was just a weird vibe. Not quite fear, but not relaxed either. I finally decided to stay one more night, but I took precautions. I had a small camping hatchet I brought for chopping firewood, and I slept with it next to me in the tent, along with my flashlight. I zipped up the tent real tight and double-checked everything around camp before I laid down. I didn't even light a fire, just crawled into my sleeping bag and tried to pass out. But sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I woke up. I don't know what woke me exactly, maybe just a noise or maybe that feeling again. The woods were dead quiet, like weirdly silent, no crickets, no wind, not even frogs from the creek. Just this thick silence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal ones either. Slow. Human. Crunching the forest floor like someone was walking in big, careful steps. They came from the direction of the creek and circled around the tent. I held my breath, heart pounding so hard I thought whoever it was would hear it. The steps stopped right behind my tent. Then something brushed the fabric. Not hard, just like a hand dragging fingers or maybe a branch, but it was too precise, too soft, like someone was checking if I was awake. I didn't move. I just clutched the hatchet and stayed perfectly still. Eventually the steps faded, heading off in the direction of the trees. I waited for what felt like an hour before even reaching for my flashlight. When I finally peeked outside, there was nothing there, just dark trees and the faint glint of the creek. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat up, listening. watching the tent walls move with the wind, waiting. As soon as it was light enough to see, I started packing. I didn't even cook breakfast or make coffee. Just stuffed everything into my pack, have rolled up the tent, didn't even bother folding it right. I remember my hands were shaking so bad I had trouble buckling the straps. I just wanted out of there. I didn't want to think anymore about what or who was out there walking around my tent in the middle of the night. I kept telling myself it was maybe a ranger or some weird hiker who thought I was someone else, but none of it really added up. I was I was maybe 10 minutes down the trail, moving fast, constantly checking behind me when I saw it. A piece of my old field backpack, just lying off the side of the trail, half hidden in the underbrush. It was the top flap, torn clean off. I didn't even realize it had been missing. It looked like it had been ripped, not cut, like someone had pulled it hard. That flap had my name stitched into the inside with Sharpie. I remember looking at it for a few seconds, not even picking it up at first. Just standing there, heart going crazy. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't mine. I'd been sticking to the trail, and these were off to the side, leading toward the trees, toward my camp. Barefoot. I could see the toes. Big feet, like an adult male. The prints were fresh, not even disturbed by wind or rain. I didn't follow them. No way. I just picked up my pace. I kept my hatchet in one hand the whole hike out. The woods suddenly felt different. Not just eerie, but wrong. Like I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. Like I was trespassing, but not on private property, something older. I kept catching myself listening for more footsteps. Every bird call made me flinch. I started seeing movement that probably wasn't there, just leaves blowing or light shifting. But I was so far on edge, I almost dropped my hatchet at one point because a squirrel ran across the path in front of me. I finally made it back to the trailhead around 10:30 in the morning. My car was still there, untouched. The relief I felt when I got inside and locked the doors was unreal. But I didn't drive off right away. I just sat there, staring into the trees, trying to process what had happened. I kept going over everything in my head. The missing gear, the footsteps, the torn pack, that brushing sound on the tent. Eventually, I drove down the dirt road until I found a ranger station. It wasn't much, just a little cabin with a radio tower and 2 trucks parked outside. I went in and talked to a guy named Morgan. Middle-aged dude with a beard, seemed like he'd seen it all. I tried to explain what happened without sounding crazy, but I could tell he was taking me seriously. When I told him about the barefoot prints and missing gear, he raised an eyebrow. "You didn't see anyone at all?" he asked. "No. But someone was there. They circled my tent." He looked out the window for a few seconds, then called another ranger over. They both agreed to head out with a few guys and check the area. I gave them as much info as I could, coordinates, landmarks, what direction I hiked in. They told me to hang around the station just in case they had more questions. I waited there almost 4 hours. Then one of the rangers came back. His face was pale. He said they'd found a guy about a mile from where I'd camped. He was barefoot, wearing my spare hoodie, and carrying my binoculars and knife. They didn't handcuff him or anything, which surprised me at first. They just sat him down on the porch of the ranger station, gave him water, and kept talking to him real slow, like you would with someone who's confused or scared. He didn't say much, just mumbled. I heard one of the rangers say he looked out of it. His feet were dirty and cut up. He had this wild look in his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. He didn't seem aggressive or violent, just disconnected, like his brain wasn't all the way there. Turns out he was a local. Lived in a small town, maybe 40 minutes away. Had gone missing a while back. His family thought he'd moved out of state or joined some commune, but he'd actually been living out in those woods for over a year, according to the ranger. They said he was probably dealing with untreated mental illness. Paranoid schizophrenia, maybe. surviving off small game, stolen supplies, completely off the grid. What got to me the most was what they found at his camp. It wasn't far from where mine had been, maybe half a mile east, hidden in a dense thicket. He'd made this crude shelter out of fallen branches and plastic tarps. Inside, they found food wrappers, empty water bottles, torn clothes. They didn't charge him with anything. There was no physical attack, no threats. He technically didn't break into a house or anything. Rangers said it was best he be evaluated and taken to a facility. I don't know what happened to him after that. I didn't want to know. I never went camping alone again after that. For a while, I couldn't even sleep without keeping the lights on. I started hearing things, footsteps, breathing, that soft brushing sound. I knew it was in my head, but it didn't matter. It felt real. I told a few friends about it. Most were freaked out. A couple joked that I was lucky the guy didn't kill me. But that's not what stuck with me. What sticks with me is this one thought that I keep coming back to. How many times did he come into my camp while I was asleep? How close did he get? I'll never know. But I think about it all the time. It happened back in 2018 when I was a senior in high school. It was me, Noah, and two of my best friends, Marcos and Eli. We'd been friends since elementary school and did everything together. At the time, we all lived in a small town just outside Tyler, Texas. Not much happens out here, especially back then. Small football games, Whataburger parking lot hangs, that sort of thing. We were just bored teenagers looking for something to do before college split us up. It was Marcos's idea to go camping that weekend. He was really into old maps and local history, and he found this super outdated trail guide online that showed a few hiking paths through part of the piney woods that aren't really maintained anymore. There was a note in one of the entries about an old ranger's post that had been decommissioned in the 80s and basically left to rot. We figured that sounded cool as hell. Some off-the-grid adventure with no cell service, and no adults, just us and nature. It was late April. Weather was decent. Warm days and chilly nights. We got permission from all our parents. Well, we told them where we'd be, packed up our gear, and drove out early Saturday morning in Marcos's old Tacoma. The drive out took longer than we thought because the forest roads were garbage. We had to park way earlier than we wanted and hike the rest of the way in with our packs. By the time we made it to the clearing where the outpost supposedly was, we were wiped. But it was all there, just like the blog post said. It wasn't much, just a busted wooden shack with a rusted tin roof, half swallowed up by vines and brush. Some old signs still hung crooked on the frame. It definitely hadn't been touched in decades. The place gave off a weird vibe right away. I remember it got quiet when we showed up. Like no birds, no bugs, nothing. But we laughed it off, you know. We were out in the woods. Maybe we were just spooking ourselves. We set up camp in a small clearing not far from the shack, maybe 30 yards. Flat enough ground for the tent, some big logs nearby to sit on. That first night was pretty normal. We built a fire, cooked some chili in a camp pot, and just hung out. Talked about high school, graduation, our plans for college, nothing creepy. At one point, Eli asked if we should try to go inside the shack, but Marcos and I both shut that down quick. It looked like the floor would give out the second we stepped inside, so we just stayed near the fire. It wasn't until later that things started to feel off. I went to take a piss near some trees, and I thought I saw movement deeper in the woods. Just the kind of shadow that makes you pause. I figured it was a deer or something. But the weird part was, when I mentioned it back at camp, Eli said he thought he saw something earlier too, but didn't want to bring it up and sound paranoid. Marcos just shrugged and said, "It's the forest, man. Of course stuff's moving around." Still, we all kept closer to the fire that night. Next morning, we cooked some eggs and spam on a tiny skillet over the coals and just chilled most of the day. Did a little hiking, tried to find this dry creek bed that Marco spotted on the old map. It wasn't much, just more trees, more silence. The woods felt thick, like the air was heavy. I don't know how else to explain it. You could feel how far you were from anything man-made. No signal, no road sounds, nothing but the crunch of your boots and birds when they did show up. That night, we built another fire and just sat around talking. I remember the sky was super clear, tons of stars. I'd never seen the Milky Way that clearly before. It was peaceful, at least until around midnight. Eli got up to take a leak. We were half asleep by the fire at that point, kinda just mumbling. He walked off toward the same patch of trees I'd used the night before, maybe 30 feet away, not far. We didn't think anything of it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Marcos finally asked, "Where the hell is Eli?" I stood up and called his name. No answer. We waited another minute before grabbing our flashlights and heading in the direction he went. We figured maybe he wandered a bit to find privacy or tripped or something dumb. We weren't panicking yet, just a little annoyed. But then we couldn't find him, not even the sound of him. We shouted louder, walked farther. Still nothing. His flashlight wasn't on, his phone was still in the tent. And I'm telling you, the deeper into the woods we got, the weirder it felt. Like the air had changed. Sound didn't travel right. It felt like our voices were just being absorbed by the trees. We searched until almost 3 a.m., just calling his name over and over. We didn't want to go too far and get ourselves lost too. Marcos started swearing and freaking out, pacing in circles. I kept scanning the woods with my light, trying not to think the worst. Every crack of a twig made my skin crawl. Eventually, we had no choice but to wait for daylight. We barely slept. Just sat near the fire in silence, listening to every little noise in the woods, hoping he'd walk back into camp. It felt like we were being watched. I swear I saw something standing way out near the tree line a couple times, but I couldn't make it out. Could have been a trick of the light. Just after sunrise, Eli came stumbling out of the forest. He looked like he'd been through hell. Eli came out of the trees slow, unsteady, dragging one foot a little like it hurt to walk. His shirt was torn, his hands and forearms were all scratched up, and his face was pale, like really pale. You know when someone's so scared they look sick? That's how he looked. Marcos and I ran over to him right away. I thought he might collapse. We started asking a million questions at once. Where were you? What the hell happened? Are you hurt? He didn't answer. Not at first. He just kept looking back over his shoulder, like he thought something was still following him. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It wasn't just fear. It was like hollow. Like he wasn't really there with us yet. Marcos tried to steady him and sit him down on one of the logs by the fire, and I went to grab some water. He finally drank a little, but he was shaking so bad it was spilling all over his hands. We let him sit in silence for a few minutes, and eventually he started talking. What he told us didn't even make sense at first. It was broken, like he couldn't get the words out right, but eventually we got the full story. He said after he walked off to pee, he noticed someone crouched near our tent. Not something, not an animal. A person. At first he thought maybe one of us was messing with the food or trying to grab something, but then he realized we were both still back at the fire. He said the guy was digging through the cooler real slow, like he wasn't in any hurry, like he'd been watching us. Eli whispered, "Hey," trying to get whoever it was to back off without waking us up. That's when the man stood up and looked right at him. He wasn't right, Eli said, and his voice cracked when he said it. I asked him what he meant, and he just shook his head. He said the guy looked like he hadn't bathed in months. Matted hair, face smeared with dirt, clothes all torn up. But what really stuck with him was the man's eyes. Said they were way too wide, like he wasn't even blinking, just staring, locked in on him like a predator. Eli said there was something hanging around the guy's neck, bouncing against his chest as he stood. At first, he thought it was a flashlight or some kind of pouch, but when the guy moved closer, he saw what it really was. A big knife. Like, big. Not a hunt for a pocket knife. More like something you'd use to gut an animal. And it wasn't in a sheath or on a belt, just tied to a rope and hanging loose like a charm or something. The second the guy noticed Eli watching him, he started sprinting toward him. Not running, sprinting. Eli said he panicked and took off into the trees without even thinking. He dropped his flashlight almost immediately. He just ran in the dark, getting scraped up by branches and falling into holes, not even caring. He was sure the guy was behind him. Said he could hear the footfalls, snapping twigs, breathing. He ran until his legs gave out, and he crawled up the side of a tree, grabbing branches and pulling himself as high as he could. He stayed in that tree for hours, curled up in the crook of a branch, holding his breath whenever he heard movement. He said at one point the guy came back. He was standing at the base of the tree, pacing around, muttering something Eli couldn't hear clearly. Just pacing and turning, pacing and turning. Eventually, the man walked off, but Eli didn't climb down until the sun started coming up. That's when he made his way back to camp. I didn't know what to say. Neither did Marcos. We believed him. We absolutely believed him. There was no way he made that up. The scratches, the way he was still trembling, he wasn't faking it. We packed up camp in total silence. It wasn't like the fun, hey, we survived the woods kind of packing. It was frantic. Shaky hands stuffing gear into bags without even folding it. We didn't even eat. We just wanted out. I kept looking over my shoulder the whole time. The forest didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt wrong, like there was something just behind the trees watching us. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. The hike back to the truck was brutal. None of us said much. Every stick snap made us jump. Every shadow looked like a person. We stopped twice because Eli had to sit down. He was limping worse now, and his arms were scratched up pretty bad. By the time we made it to the truck, we just threw everything in the bed and drove. Marcos didn't even turn on music. We rode in silence for over an hour, just watching the tree line roll by out the windows like it was going to reach out and grab us. Back in town, we took Eli straight to the urgent care clinic. They cleaned his cuts and gave him something for the swelling. The nurse kept asking what happened, but we just said he got lost and fell in the woods. We didn't really know how to explain the rest without sounding crazy. After we left the clinic, we went to the sheriff's office to report it. That part was weird. I guess we expected them to be a little more alarmed or take us seriously, but they just kind of nodded through our story, asked a few questions, and said they'd send someone out there to take a look. I remember one of the deputies asked if we were drinking or using anything. We weren't, obviously, but you could tell they weren't buying the story. They said there were no known camps or squatters in that area, no missing persons, no signs of anyone matching Eli's description of the guy. They sent a small search team out the next day. Marcos and I offered to go with them, but they told us to stay put. A couple days later, one of the deputies called and said they didn't find anything. No footprints, no disturbed gear. We never heard anything else. That was 6 years ago now. I haven't gone camping since, and I don't think Marcos or Eli have either. We still talk sometimes, but not about that weekend. We don't bring it up, not even to joke. I think we're all trying not to think too hard about it.